Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 503 for the 10th of June, 2018. Not July, and I think last week on the show I said the month was July. Getting ahead of myself, it's June. This is the 10th of June. Unless you're listening in the United States when this comes out, when it's the 9th of June. Oh, the magic of time zones, I know, because I'm in that time zone right now. I'm not in the 10th of June time zone, I'm in the 9th of June time zone, but this is the Skeptic Zone for the 10th of June. And you think that we have trouble now, just wait till people start travelling near the speed of light and they have to deal with ridiculous time zones. Jet lag is bad enough as it is. What are they going to call that? Time lag? Light lag? Time zone, jet lag, light lag? Boggles the mind. And I hope this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone will also boggle the mind. We're going to start with catch up with Michael Marshall from the Good Thinking Society in the UK with news on a victory, a court victory against homeopathy. Very interesting and very good news coming out of the UK. All those details coming up with Michael Marshall. Following that, a short promo for an upcoming talk in Sydney with my old friend, Dr. Angela Matke, the emergency physician. Dr. Angie's going to be in Australia, and we're lucky enough to have her talk at Skeptics in the Pub in Sydney. Then we have Maynard at Skeptics in the Pub. I was here in the Bay Area, just arrived in fact, half asleep. But over in Sydney, they had Skeptics in the Pub. I was texting Maynard a few things, and he was running around with his microphone asking skeptics the big question: do you think skeptics can learn anything from the believers in the paranormal? Some interesting answers. And then Maynard interviews Dr. Brad McKay, who was the guest speaker at Skeptics in the Pub. Wide-ranging, sort of rambling interview in true Maynard style. Many topics covered, including Brad's opinion on drug use. Very interesting. Always good to hear from Dr. Brad McKay on the Skeptic Zone. Now, if you are in the Bay Area, tomorrow, Sunday the 10th, which is today in Sydney, just ignore all that time zone stuff. Sunday the 10th, in Berkeley in California, we have Skeptical at skepticalcon.com, and I've just been told by my good friend Eugenie Scott that tickets will be available at the door. So if you haven't bought your tickets yet, don't worry, you can turn up and still enjoy the day tomorrow. Or if you go to skepticalcon.com, links on the show notes, you can buy tickets online if you wish. Looking forward to that very much in less than 24 hours as I'm recording. And if you're coming along, I certainly look forward to seeing you there. And I will also be at the Skeptical pre-conference Skeptics in the Pub. And that's starting at about 7 p.m. on Saturday the 9th of June, the day I'm recording this message in this time zone. Bear with me. And that's at Commel Restaurant at 2020 Shattuck Avenue, Berkeley. And that would be great to see you there too. Who knows, maybe I can rustle up some spoons and do some spoon bending and fold some origami pigs and just have a good time seeing everybody at Skeptics in the Pub here in California. Don't be surprised if I interview you for the Skeptic Zone. But if you can't make any of that because you're living in Oregon, well, why not come along to a special meetup, Being a TV Skeptic it's called. It's a talk by me at Pappy's Pizza in Bend, Oregon, and that will be on the night of Monday the 18th of June from 6 p.m. More details on this week's show notes, and I'm looking forward to that immensely. Have not been up to Bend, Oregon before, and I think I'll try to find some time to hunt for Bigfoot. Well, why not? That's what you do. You go to Scotland, you go to Loch Ness, you go to Oregon, you look for Bigfoot. If I find one, you'll be the first to know. And my host for my visit up there is Brian Dunning from the Skeptoid podcast, and I thank him very much for organising the talk. But now it's time for me to run upstairs, have an extra large cup of coffee, trying to get my head together. Jet lag's a funny thing. Sometimes after a couple of days you think you're doing really fine, and bammo, 2 o'clock in the morning you're wide awake. Extra large cup of coffee, some nice sourdough bread and clam chowder. I'm going to run upstairs, see if there's any of that about, and run back downstairs very quickly to bring you the rest of the Skeptic Zone. And joining me now all the way from the UK is our frequent UK correspondent, I'm very pleased to say, from the Good Thinking Society, Michael Marshall. Hi, Marsh.
Hey, Richard. Hey, thanks for having me back. Always lovely, always a pleasure to be on the Skeptic Zone.
It's nice to know I can contact you at relatively short notice, because just yesterday on the interwebs, I noticed, or was it the day before, I noticed a news report from the Good Thinking Society about, well, what I guess we can say is a victory in this ongoing homeopathic dilution nonsense. What can you tell our audience?
Yeah, so this is something that's been rumbling for a little while. So I think actually the last time, or one of the previous times I was on the show, I mentioned about the fact that NHS England, which is the body that advises GPs here in the UK of what they can and can't do, or what they should and shouldn't do, what drugs to use, what things they shouldn't be using. Back in November, they issued guidance to GPs to say that GPs should not prescribe homeopathy. Which is something we obviously wholeheartedly agree with, and we've been campaigning for and pushing for some time. But while we agree with it, it turns out, unsurprisingly, the homeopaths did not agree with it. And so they brought a legal case against NHS England to have them overturn the guidance of their expert panel and try and rescind that advice to GPs to stop prescribing homeopathy. And that legal case was heard a couple of weeks ago over the course of 3 days, and the results of that legal case were just announced. And we're very pleased to see that the judge threw the case out completely, rejected all the grounds that the homeopaths brought forward, and as such will not be ordering NHS England to change their decision or to go back and make another decision, and the original decision will stand, which is fantastic news.
Were you more or less expecting this decision, or is it a pleasant surprise?
I would say I was quietly confident that this is the direction that it would go. So we took a very close interest in the consultation by NHS England when it happened, partly to make sure that we weren't including something in there that didn't make sense, or that they weren't asking a question that might get them the wrong kind of insights. You know, you could very easily ask the question, do you find homeopathy beneficial? Which is very different from, is homeopathy actually beneficial? You know, yeah. if you're not looking for objective outcomes, but subjective outcomes. So we were closely monitoring the consultation to make sure that it was being conducted fairly. But we're also monitoring it to make sure it was fair to the homeopaths, because if a consultation is done as responsibly and as fairly as possible and gives as much opportunity as possible for the people who do believe in homeopathy to have their say, when the decision comes out and it goes against homeopathy, it's very easy to then defend that consultation and say, well, this was a very fair process, it was all conducted properly, and so the outcome is allowed to stand. So when we saw the consultation, it certainly looked to my eyes that they'd given the homeopaths ample opportunity to put their case forward, every possibility to make the strongest case for keeping homeopathy as possible. And unsurprisingly, it turned out that strongest case wasn't strong enough to justify it. But to give them every opportunity means when they complain that things weren't happening correctly, you can stand up to that in court. And that's one of the things the judge found. So, for example, the British Homeopathic Association, which were the ones bringing this case, and I think they raised something like £20,000 or £30,000 from their supporters to challenge this. So there's a decent amount of money flying around here. So one of the things that they said was that the online consultation was too difficult for people to fill in because they had 2 complaints from people who said, we tried to fill this in and we found it very difficult. But in throwing that argument out, the judge pointed out that the only 2 complaints the BHA had received were from people who had still managed to fill in the consultation. So they might have found it difficult, but they managed it, which is to say that it wasn't prohibitively difficult. So I think I wasn't there in the courtroom, although I do know people who were there, and the sense that they got was that the BHA were trying as many different arguments as they could to try and demonstrate why they felt this was unfair, which bizarrely enough is sometimes indicative of not having a strong argument. Because if you've got a very, very strong argument, that's the argument you make. But if you go in and you make lots of medium or low-strength arguments, it's because you didn't have what looked like killer grounds. And, so when I heard what had been said in the courtroom, I felt optimistic that it would go the right way. And it's very pleasing to see that it has actually gone the right way then.
It's interesting you should talk about the fact that it was very important that the homeopaths in this situation were given every fair and reasonable opportunity, and I completely agree with you. And I couldn't help being reminded of when various skeptical organisations around the world, the Australian Skeptics, for example, or in the old days, the James Randi Educational Foundation, had psychic tests. One of the benchmarks, one of the golden standards was to give the claimant every fair, reasonable and true opportunity to prove their case. And as we discovered, even if we do that, they will still find reason to complain afterwards.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think it's the right thing to do from several different perspectives. I mean, one is that you want every opportunity for a genuine effect to show itself. So you don't want to bias in case you happen to be wrong, and in case the person you're talking to is psychic, or in case there is some stellar evidence in favour of homeopathy somewhere. You want that to be heard. But also, you want it to be clear that we aren't looking for a whitewash. We aren't looking to bias the outcome. We want the fairest outcome possible. And if that means that we hear the other side out and we give them every opportunity and still find, or in this case the judge still finds, that the sceptical position was right, that just means that we can defend ourselves even better. And yes, the people we disagree with are very unlikely to accept the decision. They're very unlikely to change their mind. But we can at least stand by it and say we did everything we could to give them every opportunity. And from a moral sort of ethical standpoint, we've acted as responsibly as we can, really.
Yeah, and I think that's vital. I think that's so important. I can't stress that enough. And again, I hark back to the tests that we do when we're testing paranormal claims, that we are absolutely certain that we make sure it's fair for everybody. But I noticed the British Homeopathic Association, or was it somebody speaking for them, produced a video not very happy about the outcome at all.
Yeah, so that would have been the head of the British Homeopathic Association. And, of course, they're not going to be very happy. I would actually disagree with the way they characterise both their legal case and this decision, because obviously they paint this as being an unfair decision. They paint this as being against patient choice. They paint their legal case as being strong and brave and all these kinds of things. And having been familiar with some of the arguments that were made and having read the full judgment of the courts, it's very hard to see how, if you're familiar with the details of the case, that's the conclusion you come to. But I suppose that's the conclusion you're going to come to if you're heavily invested both emotionally and financially in this case. So I guess it's kind of natural that they're very upset and they want to obviously show their supporters the best side of this defeat as possible. But the important thing is that this was a defeat. The important thing is that the courts stood by the decision of NHS England and the guidance to GP stands. Ironically enough, although this is being painted in the press as being the court upholding the ban on homeopathy, this isn't actually a ban on homeopathy. NHS England doesn't have the ability or the authority legally to outright ban something. So instead, what they're doing is they've issued guidance to GPs on what they can and can't prescribe. But GPs can just ignore that guidance if they'd like to.
Right.
And given that there are You have the Faculty of Homeopathy, who are the professional membership body of doctors and other healthcare professionals who are also homeopaths. If you are a GP and you're prescribing homeopathy and the NHS England says, we advise you not to, you may well just carry on and do that anyway. So what's really, really important is that we go not just from the decision by NHS England, but we look at what NHS England recommended to the Department of Health, who they said to the Department of Health, you have to actually ban the prescriptions of homeopathy to end homeopathy completely. And that's something we've been pushing for with good thinking too. So while this is a hugely symbolic, a hugely important statement and a hugely symbolic statement, it isn't actually an outright ban. Only the Department of Health can do that, and that's the next step, is to get the Department of Health to listen to NHS England and ban homeopathy prescriptions, to listen to the legal case that we brought back in 2015 and do the same ban too, and that's what we'll be pushing for next.
Wow, interesting days, Marsh. I tell you what, folks, I'm going to link to the article at Good Thinking that covers this, but I'm also going to link to the video put out by the British Homeopathic Association, because I think it's important people see that, because when I viewed it, what I was viewing was somebody who is deeply committed to homeopathy, whose worldview is that homeopathy works, full stop, therefore, and you can see the rest. It's an interesting study in psychology. Well, a lot of these things are, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I say this very often, that when it comes to homeopathy, I don't think I've met anybody who is a proponent of homeopathy that I would say appears to be doing it just for the money or doing it dishonestly. I genuinely think they really do believe in what they're doing, as far as I can tell. I think they really do think that they're helping people, and they just have the wrong answers, but they hold those incorrect beliefs incredibly sincerely. And I think that's an important thing to hold in mind when we are counteracting the types of things that they would say, and we're trying to debunk or educate the public about homeopathy, is that we aren't dealing with people that we can write off as being, knowing charlatans and all that kind of stuff. These are people who are quite sincere in their belief and really think they're doing well and want to help in almost every case that I've seen.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's been my experience too with similar sort of people here in Australia. Well, Michael Marshall, thank you very much for dropping everything and coming to do an interview with me. I don't know what time it is in the UK. It's reasonably early in the morning here in California. I can never get the hang of these time zones. But for now, Michael Marshall from the Good Thinking Society, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Richard. Always a pleasure to be here and to update you on the latest, and hopefully I'll be able to be back on the show soon and tell you about the next big victory in our campaign against NHS homeopathy.
We look forward to it. From the website of Good Thinking Society, goodthinkingsociety.org. Published on June the 5th, Homeopath's legal challenge to NHS England fails. By Michael Marshall. Today, the British Homeopathic Association lost their legal case against the National Health Service England, with the judge dismissing all 4 parts of their case. The British Homeopathic Association, or BHA, had sought to overturn the NHS England's announcement in November 2017 of new guidance which advises GPs not to prescribe homeopathic remedies. Michael Marshall, Project Director of the Good Thinking Society, said of the decision, quote, "We are delighted to see the courts reject the BHA's challenge to the NHS England's very sensible advice. The NHS should not be funding treatments that have not been shown to work. We hope NHS England are now able to implement this decision without further unnecessary delay or distraction, to help make sure resources are saved for treatments that actually work. However, this is only guidance for GPs from NHS England, which some GPs may choose to ignore. Given that there are some GPs who are also homeopaths, this guidance won't entirely end homeopathy prescriptions. That's why we're calling on the Department of Health to undertake the recommendation by NHS England to add homeopathic products to the NHS blacklist, just as we asked them to do in October 2015. The last few years have seen almost every part of the NHS end support for homeopathy, and this court decision only goes to further underline the fact that homeopathy warrants no place in modern healthcare." End quote. Australian Skeptics, Skeptics in the Pub for Sydney. Note the change of date, folks. It's going to be on the 12th of July. A special event with Dr. Angela McKay. What happens when the dogma of religion faces off with the dogma of medicine? Science-based medicine happens. Join Dr. Angela McKay, MD, FACEP, as she traces the skeptical path through medical history. Dr. Angie is certified by the American Board of Emergency Medicine as an emergency physician and lives in Atlanta, Georgia. She practiced in Atlanta for years, but loves being on the move. Dr. Angie has combined her passions for emergency medicine, patient protection and travelling, and now works all over the United States. She is the Assistant Director of SkepTrack at DragonCon in Atlanta and has given talks at many skeptics meetings in the United States and Australia. Please note the date has been moved to accommodate Dr. Angie. Normally, Skeptics in the Pub is on the first Thursday of the month. In July, it'll be on the second Thursday, the 12th. People generally start arriving around 6 p.m. after work, and the talk begins at 7 and lasts for about 30 minutes. The night finishes when the last person is thrown out. Enjoy a meal and a drink, and another meal and another drink, accompanied by lively discussion, free spoon-bending lessons, and the company of other skeptics, as we cover a variety of interesting topics. There is no need to belong to Australian Skeptics. No, anything. All are welcome. Bring friends too. Parking is available nearby, or simply catch the train to Wynyard. More details at skeptics.com.au or skepticzone.tv in this week's show notes.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Yes, it's Skeptics in the Pub. And I've just received a text from Richard Saunders, because he tells me what to do. And he says, what is the question for this evening? Let's see. The question for this evening is... do you think there is anything skeptics can learn from the believers in the paranormal? Do you think there's anything skeptics can learn from believers in the paranormal? And we've got Dr. Brad McKay doing stuff here. He's going to be talking about things. Also, the Conversations on the ABC website was talking about how the flu vaccine is only 1% effective. And it then went on to say that if the Spanish flu broke out again, it'll be all right because it's a secondary infection that everyone died from. Oh, hello, Barman. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
What's everyone drinking tonight?
Not much.
Not much. Typical skeptics, not putting it down. Jessica Singh, how are you?
I'm extremely well. I hope people are drinking a lot because we have to make our minimum spend.
Well, I'm doing my bit.
Yes.
And look, I've actually sent some drinks to Richard Saunders, even though he's in America.
Yeah. Richard's not here. Oh, we miss him.
The question is, what do you think skeptics can learn from believers in the paranormal? Is there anything we can learn from them?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
What can we learn?
Because it's about belief, to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's about belief. Wow. I'd have to think about that one.
How happy to think about that? Look, hello, sir. Maynard here. Oh, he's just ordering his drink. Do you think there's anything skeptics can learn from people who are into the paranormal at all?
I mean, you can learn where thinking is flawed, and how you can make mistakes, and that you're not immune from making mistakes in logic.
And are you a fan of In Search Of or Ancient Aliens? Do you occasionally look at those shows and go, I do?
I find them too painful.
It's my guilty pleasure.
Yeah, it's not for me. But I have a few friends who love it, so...
Okay, cool. Look, do you think skeptics can learn anything from the paranormal people?
Yeah,
I think absolutely. It's a good I've forgotten the word, but it's a good way of judging how people react in stressful situations.
Okay. So, do you ever watch paranormal shows like Ancient Aliens?
I don't watch stuff like that. No, I don't have to.
I can't get anyone that watches that.
I've seen enough memes to know what it's about.
It's fantastic. They've got the guy with the big hair.
Yeah, he's got amazing hair, isn't he?
See,
no, I mean, that kind of stuff, it's interesting for about 5.5 seconds, and then it wanes a little bit. I'm more of a, I prefer the scripted paranormal stuff like The X-Files, etc.
You're much smarter than me, too. That's probably why you go, that's just... Do you think the skeptics have anything to learn from the paranormal people?
That's a tough question. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm a bit speechless. I'm sure we do.
But because there's a lot of belief and there's a lot of half-based stuff, but there is a certain stuff that's good.
So let me just... Okay. I think I'll need to think about this more thoroughly to answer in any specific way. But I would say generically, yes, we can learn something from anyone. Either we can learn positively or negatively. So you will learn from almost everyone, even the people who are most wrong in the world, do something.
Even David Duchovny, because he can sell tickets to his sound check. That's pretty good.
Clearly, there's conversations. Yes. No, but almost everyone does some things right, and we can learn from that. But even if people do something wrong, we can learn from that as well. We can learn about their thought process. And in fact, I think a lot of skeptics would be interested in the paranormal and believers in the paranormal, largely because of that, in order to understand what goes through their minds and why they think the way they do. So, yes, we definitely do have something to learn. Specifically what? I'll have to get back to you on that.
Oh, look, and did you enjoy the mind-body wallet? Because you went in disguise. Got to say, that wig was perfect.
Thanks.
Very Uma Thurman.
Borrow it to go doctor shopping.
Uma Thurman, yes. And so, how many Yarny eggs have you got now?
Well, actually, they were really expensive there. They were like $85, and I found some on Etsy for $6, so,
Now, they are actually porous, aren't they?
They are. That's why they're a problem. If you would like to learn more, please come to Skepticon in October, because I will be talking about exactly this subject, and there will be pictures.
And I'll be watching to see if anyone walks out. And I'll be going, oh, come on, man. Yeah. Of course, there's a bit of a major scandal here. As I got my glass of champagne from the bar, Aletha cried foul. And so you've got a problem with the champagne serving.
The champagne serving? Yeah, you got more than me. Outrageous.
Well, see, I look like a seasoned alcoholic, where you just look like a very talented amateur. Which is good. That's a good thing.
I don't know if I should take that as an insult, Maynard.
No, that's a compliment. like if they gave it to him, they'd just give him the entire bottle, wouldn't they, Tim?
Yeah, they do. Regularly. Yeah.
Look, I've had word from Richard Saunders, who's in the US at the moment. He's currently doing a property development in San Francisco or something. I'm not quite sure. Maybe he's driving the Google bus. I don't know. And he wants to know, is there anything the skeptics can learn from believers in the paranormal?
Yes. Lots. Tons. I think that's why we went to Mind, Body, Spirit last week. It gives us an opportunity to sharpen our skeptical tools. So we have to look at what they're claiming, look at why they believe these things, and try to look at it critically. I'm not saying completely debunk the whole lot, because obviously sometimes things turn out to be true, but if we're talking about paranormal things, mostly we're talking about things that turn out to be something else, explainable by science.
So are you an Ancient Aliens fan at all?
No, I don't know what it is, Maynard. I know you discussed it before.
Okay, fair enough then. Okay. What about In Search Of, those old shows with Leonard Nimoy?
Those either. I haven't seen those either. But years ago in the UK, I used to watch The X-Files. I used to read things like Skeptical Inquirer, or not Skeptical Inquirer. There was another one, For Woo. There was like a Woo-based one.
Fortean. The Fortean Times.
All those sort of things, yes. So I'd read all those sort of magazines and look into all of that stuff. Very clearly not from a scientific angle, just because I loved it. I thought the whole idea of all that sort of stuff was great. So I was a full believer.
But I mean, David Duchovny, he's hot.
He is, yes. Definitely a believer in that, yeah.
And I just love the way that his acting career took off just as he was finishing, I think, his English degree or something, and he had to do his spoken word English dissertation, and he just went off. And they were asking him about the, I think the novel or the play Stormy Petrel. And he was saying, petrol is English for gasoline and stuff, and he really stuffed that up. So yes, that is true. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I don't know about anything about that.
Did you hear what his gig was like? Did he do a good show in Sydney?
I was there. Trish and I were both there.
How was he?
It was interesting. We were both very emotional about the whole thing. We both got our pillowcases signed because that was available to buy. It was good. It was interesting.
So he had his own pillowcase with his photo on it? Cool.
Yes, yeah. Wow. I'll show it to you.
Wow. Morrissey does that too. That's cool.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, he does indeed. Look, what do you think of Dr. Brad tonight? And do you think skeptics generally could learn something from the paranormal community at all? Is there something we can pick up from them?
I thought the doctor was quite informative. Even though I'm not from around here, it was an interesting conversation.
Where are you from again?
I'm from the States, from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Wow, okay. Ohio. Right.
Yes.
I'm just trying to think where that is. Is that in the middle of the whole thing?
Pretty much. On the eastern side, but yeah, it's considered the Midwest.
It's not a flyover state, is it? It's not a flyover state, is it?
Not quite, but it's getting there.
Okay, so Cincinnati. Okay, St. Paul, WKRP. That's pretty much all my knowledge, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
So what is great about the place you live in and what goes on there?
Well,
is there much skeptical stuff? Because it's not actually down south, so is it very religious or not?
It is fairly religious, but there actually is a fairly strong skeptical community there. There's a group called Tri-State Skeptics, and they have a few sister groups that are actually organized by the same people called the Tri-State Atheists and the Tri-State Freethinkers. Okay. So they have slightly different focuses, but they're all under one big umbrella organizations, and they actually do a lot of great work there. They have been organizing the Marches for Science, the Women's Marches.
And of course we have to ask you, how's it feel having Trump as your president?
Not good. I'm glad to be in Australia.
So what do you make of us skeptics here in Australia? Like, a lot of people hold us up as being like, the rock stars of the skeptical movement. But, just look at Richard Saunders and you'll say that's not true. But what do you think of us?
Well, judging by your successes with, stamping out the anti-vax movement, I would say you guys are doing really well. Yeah.
Well, we're trying pretty hard then. I might just have a chat too. Is there any questions you think I should ask Dr. Brad after what you saw him chat about?
No questions from me at the moment, since I am new to the country. So, just sitting back and learning.
So you're staying here or what?
I'm here on a working holiday. Cool. I'm here to learn and explore and see the place.
We've got Dr. Brad here. Hi, Dr. Brad. How are you? We're talking about the whole Australian government scheme that will make me going around to doctor shopping not possible anymore. That's boo.
I know, how terrible for you. It's going to make my job a lot easier. I always know your shifty eyes coming into the clinic.
Can you tell people that are doctor shopping when they come in, they go, I've got a bit of a back pain here and,
Well, the typical presentation is somebody who comes in limping, and then they produce a CT scan or an MRI report of their lower back, although it looks as though it's in different fonts, and it's been faxed a number of times until it's barely readable, and it's usually folded up and quite tattered because they've gone into every single GP. Every GP's opened it up, put their grubby fingers on it, and so the paper's deteriorated over time. So if somebody's actually handing that across, the suspicion is very high in those circumstances. And when you say, no, I'm not going to be giving you any opioids today, it's your first time to the clinic, this clinic will not do that, then usually their limp disappears.
It's interesting because I go to the same doctor and he's got the whole record there and the whole thing. And it's interesting, some doctors are very sticklers for regulations. Like some doctors will give temazepam to me, but they won't give Valium. Even though they're in the same category. And that would be because it's a stronger drug, or why would that be?
So Valium is a little bit longer acting, People can still function during the day with it, mostly.
No, this is for sleeping. I'm not wandering around.
Oh, well, some people will have 5, 6, 10 tablets or 50 tablets a day if they're really wanting to, because they've built up tolerant levels to it. So temazepam usually knocks you out, you get asleep. It comes in a packet of 25 for temazepam, whereas diazepam comes in a packet of 50. So usually I'm fairly stingy, and if somebody wants it, I'll maybe write them 2 tablets. And then they won't come back.
Well, I mean, can't you just get like a one-off 20 thing for them and that's it? Or
yeah, you can. Any doctor can specify certain amounts. One of the issues that I find is that I'll sometimes specify a very small amount, a limited amount, and then the pharmacist will just give them a whole bottle or a whole packet of 50 and not actually read what I've written. So I get very suspicious of some of the pharmacists around.
And look, for our listeners out there, what seems to be the naughtiness that's going on with the doctors and pharmacies at the moment? Is it mainly the opioids? That's what people are worried about? Is that seems to be what is abusing at the moment?
I suppose opioids are getting harder and harder to get. So with live feeds coming through in different states around Australia, it's very slow at the moment, but we're getting there. It will make it more difficult. Also, if you're on long-term opioids, then you really should have one provider, one prescriber of that, and you need to register in different states that one practitioner to write you the medication. If anybody else does it, it's essentially illegal unless it's an emergency situation.
Yeah, 'cause I've never really fallen over hard enough to actually have had any. So I really don't know what's going on there. But I was just actually wondering, because we talk about Nembutal, that's a barbiturate, and I've been watching Valley of the Dolls. Great movie. If you want to learn about your barbiturates there, it's all in that movie. And when did that 60 stuff get the boot? Because it's actually quite dangerous, isn't it? Because between being asleep and being dead, it's only a matter of like a couple of tablets. But what I do like about Valley of the Dolls, and you should watch this, as a doctor, all those girls can swallow a handful of pills with no water. And even you as a professional can't do that.
Different people have different skills.
Yeah. So are there any barbiturates used at all anymore? Or are they like, no?
Sometimes we'll use them. I think I've mainly seen it being used for some people with epilepsy because it can stop people from having seizures. But again, as you're saying, there's a narrow therapeutic range. It can interact with other medications. It can cause quite significant sedation and drowsiness. So we tend not to use that. They're not very clean drugs.
And also there seems to be some sort of new drug they're thinking of using as getting people off ice. It's like a slow-release amphetamine tablet capsule. Lixed amphetamine or something, I believe it's called.
Yeah, they've been trying to create all sorts of different things. So if we
I don't think... to me, that doesn't sound like a great idea to get people off ice because you're just moving them to another member of the amphetamine family.
So sometimes there are partial agonists, which are also partial antagonists. So they can activate your receptors a little bit and also block it from further medication. So you can get a little bit of a high on a long-acting dose, but then if you're topping yourself up with extra additional drugs, then it won't act on those receptors. So that's often what we try to use with implants or different longer-acting drugs. So it's that partial activation, partial blockage, so people don't get a buzz.
And as a GP on a daily basis, what's the biggest challenge you face in your surgery? When people come in, you go, oh boy.
Oh, that's a tough question.
Because one thing about GPs, which we should all know, is you get an incredible range of people coming in every 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think for me, working in a sexual health clinic, contact tracing is an issue. So often if somebody has chlamydia or gonorrhea, and I'm there going, well, you need to talk to your partners from the past 3 months about what's been happening and get in contact with them. Often people don't have their phone numbers or their names, and so that is a major problem.
I can't remember the face. He had a T-shirt, Oh, and of course, I do think it's great that your partner actually complimented you and told you to get a better dress sense on television. I think it's good because, frankly, you can't be trusted.
He just told me that I've worn worse.
Okay. Now, in a relationship, same-sex or not, is that an insult or not?
I'm still befuddled, so I'll chat to him when I get home.
Okay. And when you go on television, obviously you get emails and stuff and that from what you've said. What are you expecting to have in your inbox tomorrow from what you said this morning?
Oh, well, this morning I was talking about sleeping being an issue and how to get better sleep at night time. So there's all sorts of myths about sleep. I think a lot of the advice that doctors give is don't have coffee after about midday, don't have alcohol because you might nod off to sleep, but then you'll have a terrible sleep. You won't get into a stage 3 or 4 deep grade sleep. But one of the myths regards dairy products. So whether you're having milk, warm milk seems to be everybody's go-to, but from some of the studies, they don't really find that it's very helpful having warm milk. It's been rumoured to have tryptophans in it, which can be a good sedative because it's metabolised into melatonin.
So where does spooning fit into the whole thing as getting to sleep?
Spooning milk?
Spooning, no, spooning drinking with a partner or a pillow. I spoon a pillow and, Yeah.
Well, I think having warm milk and spooning fits into the Pavlovian response element. So if you're used to spooning and if that's putting you into a very comfortable phase, if you're having a small warm glass of milk, because if you're having a large milkshake before you go to bed, then you'll be getting up every 5 minutes to go and pee. It's fitting you into that Pavlovian response where you will feel warm and cosy and then nod off to a good night. You're yawning on me already.
One last serious thing. Today on the conversation on the ABC, they said that the flu vaccine is only 1% effective and really there's no point. And I'm thinking that whole Dr. Brad thing, he's been sucking me in. What's going on here? 1% effective, that's crap.
Yeah, they basically looked at a review that was in the Cochrane
review, which is quite well.
Yeah. So it was quite fascinating. Reading about it, they said that if there's stability in a Cochrane review, it means that there's no further information that's likely to come to hand, so we can make a generalised conclusion now. So the conclusion was based on data from 2016 and earlier. And it actually says in the Cochrane Review that this is an unusual Cochrane Review, that we're still waiting for further information to come through, and when that information comes through, then we may alter things. We don't believe that this is going to be a stable review for the next 30 years. We're expecting more information to come to light. So please read our Cochrane Review with that in mind. So it was saying that for young, healthy adults, that if you're having 100 people vaccinated, that maybe only one of them will be protected from getting the flu. They're saying that out of 100 people, you might get 2% getting the flu. So if you're stopping one of those people, or 1% from getting the flu, then those are sort of the numbers that they're talking about. But then they're saying that for young kids, it may actually be 1 in 5 that will be protected from getting influenza. So that's much higher numbers. But it doesn't take into account people that may not have the best health, people with specific conditions. There's not much data on pregnant women as well that are a major risk group, people with diabetes, people that are overweight. So it sort of depends. If you're looking at young, healthy people, then you may not get that much benefit from it.
My dad's 89. He's incredibly upset about his bilirubin level. Will bilirubin level kill you?
Well, it depends on why your bilirubin level is going up. If you have Gilbert's syndrome, which a lot of people do, including myself, then you may have an isolated bilirubin level that's high. It means that if you have alcohol or if you're having paracetamol, that your eyes will start to go a little bit of a shade of yellow because that's just how your liver is a little bit slack at metabolizing bilirubin.
Wow.
But if all of your liver enzymes are up, then that's not going to be Gilbert's, and then you could have hepatitis or alcoholic hepatitis or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, all of these other weird and wonderful things that can cause problems with liver. So,
have we got hepatitis D yet or not?
Yeah, hepatitis D is around. It's mainly in prisons.
What are we up to? F, G?
Usually hepatitis B comes with hepatitis D comes with hepatitis B. They're usually associated. There's hepatitis E as well. I think F was a furphy. But yeah, they're very rare, but they do happen.
Okay, well, I did have my vaccination for shingles.
Very good, very good. Yeah. There is another exciting vaccine that's a little bit more effective. The vaccine that we're using at the moment may be between 30 to 40% effective, depending on what your age is. And Yeah, there's a new vaccine coming out later on this year that's been used on, trialled on Americans. I always love it when they trial drugs on Americans first. So that's going to be about 95% effective out later this year. So I don't know if it'll be on the government schedule. We're still looking and advocating for that.
Dr. Brad, one last question. The Conversation article in the ABC today was talking about the Spanish flu, and they said that most people died of secondary infections because there wasn't really good antibiotics around in the 1918. So you don't have anything to worry about from the Spanish flu. Do you think that's something for complacency or not?
Well, it depends. Like, we've got vaccinations now, we've got antibiotics, but a lot of people who get influenza, they may have an inflamed lung, they may not be able to breathe properly, they can get pooling of secretions, and they can get bacteria there, then they can get a bacterial pneumonia. That's probably the most likely thing that they were sort of making an association with. A lot of people these days, like kids, are vaccinated against streptococcus. We have a pneumococcal vaccine. People over the age of 50 if you're Aboriginal, or if you're over the age of 65 if you're not Aboriginal. There's a vaccination for pneumococcus, but that's not 100% effective. No vaccine's 100% effective.
And for God's sake, put a decent jacket on, man.
Hello, I'm very good, thank you.
How would you rate Dr. Brad tonight?
11 out of 10 every time.
Oh, I'm so disappointed. Like, the whole doctor shopping thing's over.
Well, I just think you're going to have to wear a variety of disguises.
That's true. The moustache.
Yeah. Exactly, moustache, wigs. I'm a big fan of
You've got a message for people out there to do something with their phones, so if they're dying, we know who they are.
Yeah, so there's been a few occasions now where I've seen patients coming into ED who are basically at the verge of death, and it's impossible to know who they are if they haven't got identification, but they've almost always got a smartphone. But you get that kind of scenario where doctors are going through their smartphone, they can't unlock it, but they can use Siri, and they're going on Siri, call mum, call dad, and nothing's working. Whereas on most smartphones nowadays, you have a feature where you can swipe across even without unlocking it, and it'll tell you can have your blood type in there, you can have any allergies, any medications, and you can also have an emergency contact to call. Otherwise, what happens is you don't find out what's happened until after they've maybe passed away.
Well, I've got mine set up like that. What do you think I'm allergic to?
I'm going to go with bad music.
No, I love bad Electric Light Orchestra. Love it. No.
There's nothing wrong with Electric Light Orchestra.
No, there's a drug I'm allergic to, and it's fairly common.
Oh, penicillin.
Yes. Yes.
I can smell it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Are you allergic to Spandau or Duran Duran?
Oh, look, neither, although I do have a problem with pig bag sometimes. Pig bag B-sides, not good. But Richard doesn't understand this, so I should shut up. Well, so that's it for Skeptics in the Pub. All sorts of wild stuff going on. People drinking, people running around. Dr. Brad putting his jacket on and off repeatedly. But the next one is the 12th of July for a special guest here. Thursday, 12th of July. See you at Sydney Skeptics in the Pub.
Hi, this is Ben Radford.
And this is Pasquale Romero from the Squaring the Strange podcast.
Every week, my co-host and I cast a skeptical eye at a different topic.
Monsters, ghosts, demons, mysteries, and even current events are dissected and discussed with a fun, unscripted, and skeptical take that you're sure to enjoy.
Find us at squaringthestrange.com, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast platform.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and those people coming along to Skeptics in the Pub tonight here in Berkeley. I look forward to seeing you there, and I look forward to seeing those people coming along tomorrow to SkeptiCalCon. All the links on the show notes. And I might even bend some spoons next week in Bend. A big thank you to those people still sending me in very kind messages about reaching the 500th episode of the Skeptic Zone. And thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone via PayPal, Patreon at skepticzone.tv. And thank you to those people who recently have come on board to support the show. Much appreciated, and your contributions, no matter how small, mean the show keeps going. Coming up on next week's show, I hope to bring you interviews from skeptics in the pub here in the Bay Area, highlights and interviews from Skeptic Con, coming up tomorrow as I speak, and maybe the very first audio recording of a Bigfoot. If we're all very lucky. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from the Bay Area, San Francisco. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.